Now, for more on this, we're joined now by Thomas Maronick Jr. He's a criminal defense lawyer and was a host for the Mangione's family's radio station for 20 years. We reached Thomas just outside of Baltimore. Thanks for being on the program, sir.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me.
So what went through your mind when you heard of Mangione's arrest?
I was shocked. I was just stunned because when I saw the name, I thought, is that the same family that I knew from the radio show for 20 years? And then I did some digging and saw it was the same family, and I just couldn't believe it. It's truly the last name you'd think of to be associated with something like this. It's just not them.
It always feels surreal when you end up finding out that you're close to a story that the entire world is watching. And now, obviously, any insights about the suspect and the family are obviously very interesting for people to hear about. So given the fact that you worked with the family for so many years, what can you tell us about who they were?
They had Nick Mangione Sr. as their patriarch, and he was so generous. He would donate to all sorts of charities. He supported me on the radio show, even when I had views that were not necessarily what the rest of the station had. He let me express those views. He let me have guests on who had a wide variety of views, and I thought that was just an example of the class that he showed. And then his son, Nick Jr., who took over for Nick Sr., was wonderful as well. Just to give you an example of the generosity, they threw a holiday party several years ago for members of the WCBM team. And this was when Nick Sr. was alive. This is back before 2008. And they spared no expense. They bought us amazing dinners, some of the best Italian food you've ever had. And it was just the heart of the man, just somebody who wanted to take care of the people who worked on his station. So just amazing things to say about the Mangiones and the way they treated me over 20 years.
Right, and yet now we have Mangione's son, Luigi, charged with just about the worst crime you can have. What were your recollections of him?
I never met Luigi to my knowledge. I may have met him in passing, but I don't recall it. But I will say this. This is a family that is very close-knit. There are, like in an Irish family, I'm Irish, there's a lot of siblings, a lot of grandchildren. And Nino Mangione, who's a state delegate, he's a cousin of Luigi Mangione, and I certainly knew Nino from being formerly the social media and content director at WCBM. But he was, Luigi that is, the valedictorian of Gilman School. Now, this is a prestigious high school. I went to a rival school, so I would say it's a mostly prestigious school, but nevertheless, a very good place to go. And he wasn't just a student there, he was the valedictorian. Something about Baltimore that I think is important is people say all the time, what school did you go to? And they don't mean which college, they mean which high school. And this is somebody who went to Gilman School, went off to be an Ivy Leaguer. So he had the whole world in front of him, and I think was on course to be one of the next great Mangione family members. There have been so many who've been successful, but then obviously these allegations.
We've also been reporting that he was out of communication with his family. What do you know about that?
I don't know anything about it specifically, as I was never reached out to by the family to say, hey, have you seen Luigi? I can't imagine they would have under the circumstances, but it's really surprising given how close-knit they were. It just, again, so out of character from what I know of the Mangiones.
I want to shift over to the fact that you're a criminal defense lawyer as well, and today the world is watching as he was entered into court, that outburst that played out. How do you think that might impact a suspect in a case like this?
Well, that was his and justice for all moment. It certainly felt like it. I don't know if he was trying to be Al Pacino or what, but it came across just as very concerning as a defense lawyer. You want your client to remain silent and you want the facts of the case to be shown rather than the defendant to go off and say something that could harm him. So as a defense lawyer, that made me cringe. I know that his lawyer is challenging the extradition, and typically extradition is if you believe that there's some factual issue behind why someone would be transported to the other jurisdiction, such as John Smith being the name of your client, and you don't believe it's the right John Smith, or you want to just argue for a bond. But they're challenging the extradition, which I thought is curious. I will say I can't imagine any judge giving a bond in this type of circumstance. Murder charges are very serious, and it's just very rare when you can get a bond in those types of cases.
The defense lawyer also was saying that he'd seen no evidence, hadn't even seen the charge sheet yet, although it seems like the world has seen a lot of the potential evidence that will be entered into court. And on that front, given all of this pre-trial publicity that we've seen, how does that impact the way that the defense might try to mount its case and the difficulty of, I would even think, having a jury pool, for example, who hasn't seen this case?
It's going to be very tough because this is a national case. They may file motions to change venue, but then again, where would you move it to? Because this is such a big national and international story. Is there any jurisdiction that hasn't seen or heard of this case? So I think that's something there, but I really do believe you're going to get questions ultimately on a jury pool, voir dire questions about their views on healthcare. Have they been satisfied with health insurance? Have they treated their family fairly? Or were they denied on a claim? Do they have some animosity towards healthcare companies? I think that's becoming a real issue. I think it really obscures the tragedy of this, that a man was killed on the streets of New York in cold blood, and a family has lost a father, an ex-husband, a son. It's a tragedy no matter how you look at it.
Yeah, definitely an important point, and let's end it there. Thomas, thank you very much for joining me.
It's a pleasure. Thanks, Chris.
Thomas Maronick Jr. is a criminal defense lawyer and was a host for the Mangione family's radio station for 20 years.